Judge Rambo, thank you so much for joining us for the Dauphin County Oral History Project. As you know, we're interviewing people who have primarily prominent positions in the bar, very interesting positions in the bar, and people who will, provide information that folks far in the future, long after we're gone, will be able to review so they know what it was like in the Dauphin County Bar Association early on. So thank you very much for being here.
Pleasure to be here.
So, for the record, I think everybody knows you, but would you just tell us what's your current position?
I am a senior judge on the federal court in the Middle District of Pennsylvania. A senior judge is a person who can take senior status at age 65, provided that their age and their years in service equals 80. I managed to get to the 65 and the 80 before I got to 65, and that allows me to take a reduced caseload.
Well, we're going to talk later about whether or not you've ever really taken a reduced caseload, having worked for you.
Yes.
Twice. I rather doubt that your caseload is much reduced.
It's about 70%.
Finally.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. So,
I can go down to 25% of a regular judge's caseload.
So let's start at the beginning. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, where you were born and raised.
I was born and raised in Royersford, Pennsylvania. I lived with because my mother and father were divorced eventually, I lived with my grandparents in Reading, Pennsylvania. And then when my mother remarried, she married a soldier during World War II, and we were stationed in Camp Pickett, Virginia, until the end of the war. And my stepfather got transferred to Carlisle Barracks, and he eventually retired from the barracks. So I have been a Carl Indian, so to speak, from the grade 6 all the way to the present time.
You were in 6th grade when you came to Carlisle.
Yes,
with your stepfather.
yes.
And then you stayed here for the rest of your life?
Yes,
To this date?
yes.
Well, tell us about what first made you decide to be a lawyer. What got you thinking about it?
The school bus brought us from Carlisle Barracks into what is now the Franklin School. It's now the YMCA, and the bus passed the law school, and something just said, "You're going to be a lawyer one of these days."
So
and that drove me from that day on.
So the bus was passing the
Law school. And it was like a voice telling me, "You're going to be a lawyer."
Did you know any lawyers at the time?
Just the people who misrepresented my mother during her divorce proceedings.
So that was your entire experience with the
it
law?
was. But I got interested in reading about the law.
So what did you do? I mean, what did you plan? How did you plan it out that you would become a lawyer?
Interesting, and I didn't do that well in grade school, but once I made that decision, Carlisle High School was from 7 to 12. I became a straight A student from that point on because I knew that the only way I was going to get through college is scholarships. And so that drove me.
So you had no family members who were
I was the
lawyers
first person in my family to go to college.
And you thought, if I understood what you just said, you believed that there wouldn't be money to send you there, so you were going to earn your way through
That's right.
scholarships. And is that what happened?
What was very interesting, in my senior year, my English teacher came up to me and said, "Sylvia, where are you going to apply for college?" And I said, "The only place I can apply is Dickinson because I have to live in Carlisle and there's no transportation." She said, "No, you don't want to go there." And I said, so I put my eggs in one basket. I got not only a 4-year scholarship, but a job at Dickinson College.
At Dickinson College?
Yes.
That's wonderful, Judge Rambo. So you went to Dickinson College,
Yes.
undergrad,
Yes.
and you excelled there, I take it?
Yes.
You did. And did you work there as well?
Yes.
What did you do?
Library.
You worked in the
Library.
Well, that was convenient.
Yes.
So, and had you thought about where you wanted to go to law school at that time?
You know, when you're in a place for such a long time, you want to get away. So I decided I had to get away from Carlisle and what have you. So I applied at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. and was accepted. However, I had to work in the daytime. I worked as a psychology professor and went to law school at night. And those classes were absolutely humongous.
So,
They were so big. I had people sitting on windowsills and what have you.
oh my gosh. Was that a 4-year program?
Yeah,
Because
3
it
years.
was night? Oh, no. So you
Oh,
did it.
no, it would have been a 4-year.
And so you worked while you were in law school?
Right.
Okay. So I want to go back just a minute. So back in that, at that time, this was what, 19...
Well, it would be 50. I graduated from college in 58.
In 1958, you graduated from college, and so then you went right into law school.
Right.
So what did you have to do to get into college at that, law school? Did you have to...
I just applied, and that was
just
it.
apply, and that was it? Did you take something like the LSAT?
Yeah, we always had, yes.
All right, so then you started at DC. Were you living in dorms, a dorm there?
Yes.
And how did that go? How did your first year of law school go?
It was difficult.
And why was that?
Because of trying to work in the daytime and go to law school and getting time to study was difficult.
How did you work that out? You just worked long
No,
hours?
yeah, I just stayed up until I fell asleep.
I can picture it, Rambo, very easily. So, and did you do well?
Not as well as I did when I left George Washington. Okay, what happened is I was taking my first year semester finals from George Washington, and it was about January of '59, and the proctor came up to me and said, "You have a phone call." And I said, "I'm not allowed to take phone calls." She said, "You will take this phone call." My mother was due for a gallbladder operation. When I got on the phone, the surgeon said, "You have to quit and come home. Your mother has a month to live."
A month to
A
live.
month to live.
And you were in the middle of exams after your first
So
semester of law school.
obviously I went blank at that point on.
Did you finish your exams? Or you just
Yeah, I
passed
did.
up?
I finished. Eventually, when I applied for Dickinson later on, I got credit for legal writing and torts, but otherwise it was almost starting from scratch from the law school.
So after your first semester, you packed up and went back to
Yeah,
Carlisle
right,
to be with your mother, who only
yes,
had a month to
right,
live.
right.
And so she passed away within that next month?
Well, April she passed away.
She passed away in April, and then did you think about going back to law school right at that time?
I got a job from Dickinson College, a great institution. They've given me a lot in my life. During lunch hour, I walked up to the law school one day and asked for an application to apply, and they gave me the application, and I was accepted.
So what was the reason that you stayed in Carlisle?
Because my sister was there, and
And was she your younger sister?
she was 8 years younger than I.
So she was only about 12 or something?
Mm-hmm.
And did you become her guardian, or you had to take care of her?
Actually, what happened is that a family that lived next door to us when we were at Carlisle Barracks opened up their home and said, "Sylvia, you and Ruth can come and live with us so that you can see if you can go back to law school." That was,
some
yes.
good fortune coming out of
Yes.
some very bad fortune
Yeah.
that happened to you. So when you came back to Carlisle after your first year at GW, or your first semester at GW, had you written off law school? Did
No,
you think
I
you'd ever
hadn't.
go back?
It was a bug that stayed with me.
Good, good. So you said you got a job at Dickinson
Yep.
College.
Yes.
And were you back in the library then?
Yes.
And I think you just said you walked down and just one day over lunch put in your application.
Yep.
And you were accepted
Yes,
for the very next year?
yes.
Okay. So,
Actually, I started in the fall of '59.
in the fall of '59.
Mm-hmm.
So what was Dickinson Law School like back then for you?
It was very interesting. As I said, I was the only female in my class, and our classes were pretty big, about 100 and so. I was treated well. The only incident that I can remember, I tied for 10th place in my first year. That allowed you to be considered for law review. I was told that they would not make an exception to have two people that tied for 10th. However, they had to give it to the male because it was more important for him when he goes seeking a job to have the law review as opposed to a woman.
Oh my gosh.
That is the only time in my life, maybe I was ignorant of the fact, but and when I opened up my practice in Carlisle, I was accepted. But I went first, I remember my wills professor saying, "Sylvia, what are you going to do when you graduate?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to open up a shingle, open up an office in Carlisle." And he said, "You're not going to make it." So he got me a job in the trust department of the Bank of Delaware. And after 2 months there, I got a phone call from my preceptor. At that point, you had to spend 6 months working in conjunction with an attorney who was admitted to the bar.
Right,
I got
want to go over that a little bit.
I got a phone call saying, "Sylvia, I've lost 2 partners. I need your help." I said, "I'll be there in a month."
And that was from, who was that phone call from?
Jim Humer, who was my
From the Delaware offices?
No, this was the person under whom I did my
your
preceptorship.
Right, okay, let's talk about the preceptorship for just a minute. So, when you graduated from law school, and I take it, did you ever go on the law review then?
No,
Because you tied for 10th place and they
but
gave it to the male. That's, well, you got over it. You overcame that obstacle, so that's good. But you did well in law school, I'm sure, right? Obviously,
Well, I was
top 10.
10.
Yes, and then.
And I was working also.
Oh, where did you continue to work?
The
at
law
Dickinson?
school library.
Oh, you worked at the law school library. Well, that's good. That's good. So, after you graduated from law school, you had to spend 6 months with the
No,
preceptor?
between your second and third year, you spent so many weeks, and then so many weeks after your senior year in the preceptorship. I forgot what the times were, but
I see. So you could do some of the preceptorship
in between years.
obligation in between your
years
years of law school.
Right.
Okay, I see. And so you started working in the bank, and then you went to work for your preceptor.
Mm-hmm.
What was his name again?
James Humer, Humer.
And how long did you work with him?
You mean during the preceptorship?
No.
No, afterwards, when I came back to Carlisle,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it was quite a few years. I wasn't a partner, I just worked in the office.
And just took whatever cases came
Yes, right.
in? What kind of cases?
I did everything. Real estate, tort, custody.
Did you do some criminal too?
Oh, well, yes, I eventually was appointed as a assistant public defender, and I became chief public defender later on.
And back then, and this is what, about 1961 or so? So in 1976, you became the chief public defender.
Mm-hmm.
76. So back then, that was still a part-time
Oh,
job,
yes.
correct?
It was a part-time job, but it was a full-time
Right.
demand.
Yes, technically, or supposedly. And so you did that while you were also practicing law
Yes.
with Mr. Huber, right?
Humer, H-U-M.
Humer, sorry. So what came next?
Well, I did teach at the law school before I was appointed to the county bench.
And that's what I wanted to get to, getting appointed. But, Judge Rambo, I never knew you taught at the law school.
I was an adjunct professor and then an adjunct associate professor. I can remember getting a phone call from the dean saying, Sylvia, I need you to teach a class. This was in August. The professor that taught poverty law, which was debtor, creditor, landlord, tenant, and all the things that people in poverty level encounter. And I had to start teaching in September. And I said, Dean, I have never had any of these courses when I went to law school. But I did it, and then the following year, I taught sex discrimination. But I eventually had to give up the teaching because I then went on the bench.
And tell us about how that came about.
Clint Widener, who was a judge in Cumberland County, resigned, and so they needed an appointment. Because Governor Schaap was a Democrat, they thought they had to have a Democrat there, and none of the men were interested, and they came to me, and I said, I don't know. So I did, and but that was in November, but I had to run again for the position for the next election, which
This was
November.
November 78?
Yeah.
About, yeah.
Yeah.
So then you had to run the next...
That November, the next election, I lost that election.
How was that, losing that election?
It was devastating because I never thought that I would be happy. And when I lost the election, I had a hard time advocating after I came back to practice.
You had a hard time advocating?
Advocating.
Because
I looked at both sides and I told my clients, look, consider this issue. And I began to lose clients because I was not being aggressive enough.
Yes. Right.
When your opponents are registered 2.5 against 1, you know, the registration was overwhelmingly Republican and has been in Cumberland County for.
In Cumberland County,
yeah.
okay. So a Democrat just wasn't
It
going
wasn't
in
going
the
to.
county.
And the fact that I've had people challenge me that didn't think a woman should be on the bench.
You had actual challengers?
Oh,
Judicial
no.
candidates?
When I would go to rallies and so forth, people would say, well, we don't think a woman should be on the bench. And I said, but I have already done the work. I proved myself that I can do the work. Yeah, but no, we don't agree with that. It was very difficult to get people to accept a female face in a black robe.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
difficult.
And that didn't die easily, did it?
No, it didn't.
That
No, it didn't.
Right. So after you lost that election for the permanent seat or the 10-year seat
Yep.
on the Cumberland County Court of Common Pleas, what did you do?
Well, I tried to get my practice going again. And I remember going to a Christmas party here in Dauphin County, and some people came up to me and said, Sylvia, are you going to apply for the new opening for the federal court? I said, I don't know anything about it. And so in December, I filed all my papers. I had my interview before the commission. Now, this was a different type of appointment. President Carter told the senators, I want you to stay out of this. I want you to appoint a bipartisan nominating commission composed of every nationality, every type of person, professional, non-professional. And so I had my interview here in Harrisburg. And what was interesting, the interview was at night at the Pennsylvania Bar Building. And I go up to the door, and the door is locked.
At the Pennsylvania Bar Building?
And
So
I
you
could
entered-
think, you didn't have cell phones, you know, at
Right,
that point.
right.
And I was afraid to leave and go around the building for fear they might come up and say, oh, she's not here. Finally, after about 20 minutes, the chair of the commission opened the door, and he said, where have you been? I said, I've been locked out. And so this might have been February. And in March, I was told that I was, this is between January, well, my papers went in December. I was being checked by the FBI in March.
So you
So-
lost the election in Cumberland
Cumberland
County
County.
in '78. It's November '78.
Yep.
And by March '79, you were on your way to the federal bench.
No, I think it was 77, because it was 78 that I was, and it was December of 78 that I put my
Okay.
my papers in.
So a year and a half later,
Yep.
you were
Yep.
back on your way.
Yeah,
Good
and,
rebound.
and what was interesting is that in March 29th of 79, 3 Mile Island went off
Right.
partial meltdown, and what was interesting is that it was nobody here, nobody on the federal bench would take it. They were waiting for me to get sworn in.
Why do you think that is, that nobody on the federal bench would take it?
It took me 20 years of litigation, of different types of, to get that matter, and it was new.
Right.
There's never been a nuclear meltdown or partial
Litigated nuclear meltdown.
in the United States. But my husband and I were watching television, watching the news, and I said, I wonder who's going to get that litigation. He said, I think I'm looking at her.
You somehow knew how those things worked. Right?
Yes, yes.
So,
And it was interesting. My first meeting with the lawyers on that litigation, I had them come to the office. I said, gentlemen, I don't think I have jurisdiction of this case. Oh, Judge, yes, you do. They're looking at the novice saying, you don't know what you're doing. And about 2 years later, in a argument before the Third Circuit on one of the TMI cases, Potter Stewart, who was a guest judge there, said, before we hear this argument, I would like to know what the jurisdiction of the federal court is on this matter. So all the litigation went to Dauphin County judges. Then the the energy companies managed to get a bill through Congress saying that all nuclear problems will be exclusively federal court, and they made it retroactive to March 29, 1979. And so all of it comes back to me.
all the cases.
All the
remanded
cases.
Back from Dauphin
Yeah.
County Court.
That's the power of some companies. So,
So who was on the federal bench when you stepped on?
Judge Herman. Judge Herman was here in Harrisburg. Most of the judges were up in Scranton.
So it was just you and Judge Sherman
Yes.
here.
And then Judge Caldwell, I think, was appointed 2 years after I was.
Right.
And
Right. And so what was it like for you in your early days as a federal judge in the Middle District of Pennsylvania?
I could say it was lonely, but I had good staff and they kept me going. And
How were you received among your judicial colleagues, your local judicial
oh, fine.
colleagues?
No problem whatsoever.
No problems at all?
Nope. Nope.
Did you have, I mean, what about social events, that sort of thing? Was there any?
Well, I didn't have time for many social events with my caseload. It was unbelievable.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. Did you get other difficult cases?
Oh,
when you were
yes.
still on the bench?
I had a 25-defendant criminal case. It was a horse fixing case. It finally went to
Horse
trial.
race fixing case.
It was wire fraud and
Was it
so
Pocono Downs?
Pocono Downs.
Right, okay.
And it started out with 25, and I said, oh, I'm not too sure I can do that. And then we finally got down to 12. I said, oh, I can do that. And we went to trial with 12 people in that courtroom, 15 lawyers. And it was, I think it went 6 or 8 week trial. But we were constantly in court,
Yeah.
day after day. When the Penn Harris Hotel was still in existence, it was a group of business people, lawyers, politicians, all Republicans. And then it gradually evolved over the time that there were still some lawyers, but most of them were judges and it gradually included the federal judges, some of the Commonwealth judges.
So at that time, there was interaction between the Dauphin County judges and the federal judges through the
no,
round table?
not I as a federal judge. I was not invited when I came on the bench. And
Did you need an invitation? I mean, you're a judge.
You had to be invited.
Oh, I see. Okay, and did anybody speak to you about whether or not you were invited?
Well, what happened is that nobody spoke to me about it, other than the fact that I was not allowed to come. They explained that we have this round table. It's composed of men and Republicans, and you are therefore not invited. I was actually told that.
Oh, you were told.
And I won't tell you who
You
told
were
me
the
that.
female Democratic judge.
So then
And you weren't invited.
Janine Turgeon got elected to the bench, and there was a sudden change of viewpoint as to who should be invited. So I finally got the invitation.
Okay, so for the benefit of those who may not know and are watching this, Janine Turgeon
Is
was the first woman
woman judge on
to
Dauphin County bench.
Dauphin County bench, and she was a female Democrat, right?
Yep.
So that was, she was elected in
I don't know.
89 or 90, I believe.
I
right?
don't know when it was.
So that whole period of time from when you first stepped on the bench in 1978, right?
No, 79. I was
79.
sworn in August of 79.
Okay. When you first stepped on the federal bench here in 1979 until Janine Turgeon got elected, and I think that was sometime around 88 or 89 or maybe even 90, I don't quite remember, but we could figure that out. But during that whole period of time, you were not invited to the round
Correct,
table
correct.
with the other judges and whatever lawyers went with that. And after that, did you go?
I took my good old time in going.
Were you upset by that?
No,
It didn't bother you?
no.
You just accepted it?
It just rolled off my back.
Did it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and so your experience since that time, how has it been with your colleagues on the federal bench and the Dauphin County bench?
Fine. It's been very good.
It's a collegial group, right?
Yes, it is.
Good. Can we go off for a second?
Sure.
Sure. He's going to edit all these. Can we go off? That's so good that he can do that. So, I think I want to go now to go back a minute to the TMI cases and what that was like on a day-to-day basis for you. Can we do that?
Well, there were so many different types of cases that grew out of that.
Did you get that question?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
There was the class action suit of people who were within a radius of had to get out until they were sure that they could come back in. There were the biggest case was a personal injury case, people who claimed that as a result of the radiation they had this problem, this health problem, and that problem. And that one took me almost 20 years.
20 years
Yes.
of
Yeah,
adjudication.
experts from all over the world and what have you. And then there were cases brought by municipalities who had all this work to do and making certain that people could get out and that the traffic and what have you.
Right.
But it was, I don't know how many weeks of experts I had, and I finally indicated that the personal injury cases had no basis for success. And it went up to the Third Circuit, and the Third Circuit affirmed me. But then plaintiff's counsel said, there is a sentence in this opinion that we think we can open up discovery. So I certified it up to the Third Circuit to explain whether or not this did open the discovery. And the thing that really surprised me is that the 3-judge bench that was assigned to interpret this was not the 3-judge bench that initially wrote the opinion. However, they said I was correct. It's done. It's over.
So that case really occupied a lot of your time in
It
the
did.
first 20 years that you were on the bench?
Well, I mean, when you have everything, cases, 200 and 300 cases, it's a lot.
Yeah. What were your work days like back then?
I started at 7 and got home at 7. And with the briefcase full, every weekend was full.
So, if you had to pick one case, if you can, one case that really stands out in your mind among all the cases you've handled since you've been on the Middle District Federal Bench, what would it be?
I've had a couple of cases. The Cordero case against the Department of Education, which provided changes in the way people with the children who deserved special treatment in school got what they needed. I had the riots in Camp Hill, which was a real problem.
So tell us a little bit about that. Those riots were in what, the 80s, right?
I think that was in 89. What happened is that Camp Hill prison was initially set up for juveniles. And they put hardened criminals in there, and they just destroyed the place. Granted, they shouldn't have done that, but the thing that upset me was when they showed pictures of inmates on the ground, like dogs, hands cuffed behind, eating their meal like a dog. I said, that has got to stop. It did not endear me to the members of the Pennsylvania prison people. But there was a lot of litigation that came out of that case.
These were all individual prisoner cases.
Yes, yes.
Based on what happened to them in the aftermath or during and in the aftermath of those riots.
Yeah. But that, obviously, Pocono Downs, GMI. And recently, I upheld regulations issued by DEA that controlled the runoffs of fields into streams and creeks that would flow into the Chesapeake Bay.
Yes.
And that was difficult. It went up to the Court of Appeals. There were amicus briefs all the way from California opposing my decision. However, the Third Circuit said, if not now, when? And the Supreme Court denied cert. So
that's a very significant
and it has taken effect. But recently, I understand that some of the Clean Stream Act is going to be amended. So I don't know how that's going to affect.
We'll see.
It'll
be interesting.
We get some crazy prisoner cases. You know, the Middle District has a lot of federal as well as every county that's has prisoner cases. And there was a period of time, I think we were almost at 800 cases a year filed by prisoners. Some of them are funny. Some of them are really far-fetched, but you have to address them. You just don't discard them. You have to address the issues that are raised, and it takes a lot of time.
And many of them are pro se, correct?
Most of them are.
And they mostly come here under the Eighth Amendment?
No, due process. It'd be due process, incompetency of counsel in a trial.
Prison conditions.
Yeah, conditions of confinement. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So they're not necessarily your least favorite, right? There's
No.
so many of them.
There's so many of
Is that
them.
right?
Yeah. I can't say that there's a case that every case is an individual in itself. They might have a little bit of similarity in compared, but most of them are different. Mostly fine. Every now and then I would be constantly challenged. Let me give you an example. I had a case in which there was a New York lawyer. When I would rule on something, he'd say, yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. You know, this kind of thing. And I said, Counselor, come up here. Approach the bench. I said, when you get a ruling from a male judge, how do you address it? He said, well, yes, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. I said, that solves your problem. That's certainly neutral. Try that. Then you won't get confused. And he was furious.
Was he?
Yeah.
Was he in front of a jury?
No. I heard someone use the word a hot judge, and so I did some investigating. I found out that a hot judge, when he goes out on that bench, knows what in the world is going to take place out there, and you're prepared for it. Be prepared, be prepared, be prepared.
So before you go out on the bench, you've read all the papers?
Absolutely. I know what's going on.
That's what we call a hot bench.
Hot bench.
Yes, as opposed to a cold bench where the judges haven't done that. So you're also well recognized for that, Judge Rambo. So, can we go off for a second?
Sure.
I just want to tell you what's coming up so that you have a minute to think about it. I think I want to go to the Chief Judge stuff now, okay? So I'm just going to ask you, eventually you became Chief Judge.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that experience? Okay, can we do this?
Go right ahead.
Okay, so eventually you became Chief Judge of the Middle District.
And that goes by seniority. I was the next in line, and it's a 7-year stint. Mostly my accomplishments during that, it involved personnel problems, money problems, assignment of cases.
So those are the Chief Judge's duties?
Well, we operate on assignments alternately. If you've had this case, another case comes in, goes to the next judge and the next judge. Very rarely do you recuse yourself unless it's something that could, somebody could say, hey, you were involved in this, stay out of this case. But anyway, I don't want that. I think the finalization of the Civil Justice Reform Act, which is the way we now operate on our civil caseload.
So the Civil Justice Reform Act, for the benefit of those watching who may not be familiar with it, that was the congressional act that was aimed at revamping the way federal litigation was.
Streamlining it, having, we have forms that we created for, like you file a, off the record.
For case management
Case
plans
management plans and
and initial orders. And that
orders,
sort of
right,
thing.
right.
So you
I-
led that effort here
Yeah.
in the Middle District?
Yeah.
Yes. What else would you say was most memorable about your time as Chief Judge?
I also participated in the federal, at the federal level, being a Magistrate Judges Committee of the Administrative Office of Courts, which we examine people, districts who request an additional magistrate judge and so forth. I enjoyed that.
And what about the courthouse? I think you're known nowadays
Okay.
for the courthouse effort.
In '92, when I became Chief Judge, the Administrative Office sent me to San Diego to learn the ins and outs and the do's and don'ts of courthouse construction, and I have been on that project. And you have no idea how long this has been, in '92. We had a plan, and then the explosion in the Oklahoma courthouse caused a halt of all building because we had to change setback lines and different types of construction on the buildings. And then we ran into trouble with trying to find a location here in Harrisburg. It could not be in a flood zone. And we have a lot of flood zones there.
You've been on the effort since 1992?
92. And I want you to know, I spent 5 days at the at Harvard University at their architectural school. That was so long ago. Everything I learned there has gone bye-bye, so to speak.
How to design a courthouse?
Pardon?
Learning about how to design a
Yeah,
courthouse?
well, different things that you learn about construction of big buildings and what have you.
Right.
3 times they have said, we're going to consider an extension on the existing courthouse. At one meeting, it was brought up, and I said, you know how many studies have been done on the extension? Nobody answered. Has anybody read those studies? Would you like to know that they have been excluded? That idea has been excluded? Oh. And then when we started in again, there is a this is what that project will look like. See that? Little,
Yes.
see it?
Yes. Yes, I
It's
do.
pretty much like that.
Yes.
And they said, oh, and when we start again, this was after that was done. We're going to have to hire a different architect. And I said, what?
Why?
Why? They said, well, the rules and regulations require it. I said, I want to see it in black and white. I want to see in black and white when you restart that you have to get a new architect. After you spend millions of dollars for that architect, I mean, look at that place. I finally, in 2 weeks, we're going to keep the same architect. The groundbreaking was done earlier this year, and that's the shovel that I had. And guess what? I dug in and I pulled up a rock. Everybody laughed. They said, oh, what an omen. And then in April, 3,600 tons of steel will be erected, and they anticipate occupancy January of 22.
So this has been one of the major efforts.
It
of your
has
judicial career.
it has been a real challenge.
Yes.
I've
So-
learned a lot.
So what's next? What's next? You're gonna-
Well, I intend to retire.
We've been hearing that for a long time, Judge Rambo.
No, I need to retire. But, you know, we've lost a few judges, and I think there has come an age limit. I hate to admit it, but there is an age limit that I think you start to lose. I'm fine mentally, but I'm getting tired. And you know, I travel an hour each way,
Yes.
and that takes a lot out of you.
That's a lot.
I can remember in '79 when I first drove up 81 from Carlisle, I was about the only vehicle on the road. Now it's bumper to bumper.
In a lot of trouble. Do you, in your judicial career, do you see any major differences between the way people practice law now and the way they did when you first started?
Yes,
And what are
major
they?
differences. People are not attentive to the work they put out. When you start reading a brief and all of a sudden the names change, I kept thinking, this cut and paste job is wrong.
So it's a cut and paste from a prior case and they forgot to
They
change the
do,
names?
they do not check their work. They do not read court orders. They do not read the local rules. It is unbelievable. And it appears like it's rush, 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 rush. I think the electronic media has done a lot
A lot of good, a lot of harm.
harm,
A lot of
in
harm.
my opinion. When I get a phone call, Judge, we need a conference call because I'm not getting a response from my opponent, and I say, well, how did you communicate with him? Well, I sent him an email. I said, did you call him on the phone? I said, try calling him on the phone, and if he won't answer on the phone, I will have both of you here in this chambers, and you will talk face to face. And they usually get it resolved.
Yes, people will just talk to each other.
Yeah, people will say and do things in the internet that they will not say face to face.
Yes, I understand that.
And it cuts down a lot of work.
What do you think about the, sort of the collegiality in the bar now as opposed to when you first
See, I
started?
don't know. I'm not a member of the bar. I mean,
Well, just what you see, among the lawyers interacting with each other that come in front of you, do you have any observations about the collegiality of the bar as compared to when you were practicing?
I think there's less respect for each other.
If you had one thing that you would tell new practicing lawyers, what would it be? One piece of advice that you would give to them?
Treat each other with respect.
Judge Rambo, what would you attribute your success to? You of course understand that the position that you hold is one that's held in the highest esteem in the legal field, and among judges you're held in the highest esteem. you're known to be, thorough and careful and thoughtful and prepared and all that. What would you attribute your success to?
Work ethic, which I learned from my mother and my grandparents. They were Germans, and I'm a first generation American. Determination, you never quit. Never say, I quit, just keep on going.
And I remember you told me at one point in the years that I've known you that I think it was George, your husband, told you about to be prepared.
Be prepared, be prepared, be prepared.
And he told you that was the secret of success.
Yes, yeah.
And you also...
I keep this in front of me all the time. And Socrates says there are 4 things belong to a judge: to hear courteously, to answer wisely, to consider soberly, and to decide impartially. I don't always meet that standard, but I try.
That you aspire to it every day.
Yes, I keep it. It's on my desk all the time.